demos. In other videos, we talked about simple machines and how simple machines make our work easier. Today, we're going to talk about another simple machine called the pulley. And that's a pulley right there. So let's take a look at our setup. I have a 1,000-gram weight and I have a spring scale. And if I attach my spring scale to my weight and lift it straight up, it's going to weigh 1,000 grams. We can zoom in and take a closer look to see that it weighs 1,000 grams. So our spring scale showed us that this 1,000-gram weight is really 1,000 grams.
Saleh,
Yes.
what is the name of this machine?
Pulley.
Pulley. That's right. It's kind of a simple machine. You remember some other machines like pulley,
Wheel and axle.
wheel and axle? What else? Screw, incline.
Plane.
That's right.
But we said that simple machines make our work easier.
Now we are going to know how can we use the pulley to make our work easier by doing this very simple experiment on a weight.
We also said that this pulley is a simple machine. So how do we show you that this pulley makes our work easier? Well, we're going to thread this rope through our pulley, attach it to our weight, and attach the other end to our spring scale. And now we can see if our simple machine, our pulley, really does make work easier. So now it's time to see our pulley in action. I'm going to pull down on the spring scale, and when I pull down, the weight should go up, and we're going to see if this pulley has made our work easier by taking a closer look at our spring scale. Here we go. I pull down, the weight goes up, and now we're going to zoom in and take a closer look at our spring scale to see if our pulley is making our work easier. So our weight is off the ground, and when we look at our spring scale, it's just at about 1,000 grams. But wait a second, that really hasn't made our work that much easier. So let's change this setup and use this pulley differently to see how it works. To do that, I'm going to take the pulley off, the scale off, and the weight off. And I'm going to attach the pulley to my weight. Now I'm going to run my rope or my string through and attach my rope to a fixed point above the weight, and then attach my spring scale. It kind of looks like I reversed the whole thing around. Instead of the pulley being up top, the pulley's now at the bottom. And we're going to try and lift this weight with the pulley at the bottom and see what happens on our spring scale. We're going to zoom in and take a closer look so you can see if our work really is made easier by using our pulley differently. Right now our spring scale is reading 0 grams. Down here is 1,000. Watch what happens carefully to our spring scale when I pull up. I pull up, the weight is off the table, but my spring scale didn't go down to 1,000. We're going to zoom in and take a closer look. So we've zoomed in and we can see that our spring scale is right at 500 grams. I would
Oh, what happened now? Yazan? 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 Yazan, can you hear me? Okay, Muhammad?
Yes.
What happened to the weight when we use the pulley?
What?
What happened to this piece of iron when we use the pulley? Look, the weight becomes 500. But before using pulley, by using the same spring scale, it's 1,000 grams. But after using pulley, it's only 500. So the pulley makes our work easier, right?
Yeah.
say this pulley has made our work easier. In our last setup, it took about 1,000 grams. But with this setup, because we used our pulley differently, we're at 500 grams. If one pulley can make our work easier, it kind of gets me thinking, I wonder if two pulleys can make our work even easier. What do you think will happen? So now we have two pulleys set up and working together. I have a string attached to my top pulley. It comes down around my bottom pulley, up over the top of this pulley, and now I have my spring scale attached. And now I can pull down and see if this really does make our work easier. Remember, when I had one pulley at the bottom, it was 500 grams. What do you think will happen when I pull down? How much do you think our spring scale will read? We're going to pull down on our spring scale and zoom in and take a closer look so you can see what happens. I pulled down, my weight is off the ground, and now we're going to zoom in to our spring scale. You can see my spring scale's right on 500 grams. So did adding another pulley really make that much of a difference? It didn't, but remember, adding one pulley didn't make much of a difference, but then we used that pulley differently. So I wonder if we add a third pulley but use it a little differently, if that'll make our work easier. So let's try that. So now we have 1, 2, 3 pulleys working together, and try and follow this because I'm going to show you how we set this up. So I have a string that's attached to my 1,000 gram weight. Remember, it's 1,000 grams. The string comes up over top of the first pulley, down around the bottom of the second pulley, back up over top of this third pulley, and now I have my spring scale, so we can make sure to check to see if all of these pulleys working together really does make our work easier. Remember, when we had two pulleys working together, it was about 500 grams. It made our work easier. What is it going to be when we have 3 pulleys working together? We're going to pull down and see if our spring scale is working, and then zoom in and take a closer look. I pull down on the spring scale, my weight comes up, and now let's zoom in to see what our spring scale says. Take a look at this. Our spring scale is showing 300 grams.
Oh, Osama?
Yes, teacher.
So let me ask you a question. When we try to find the weight of this iron without any pulley, in the beginning it weighed about 1,000 grams. Okay. So after using the first pulley, it weighed about 500 grams. And what happened when we use 3 pulleys together? It weighs 300 grams. 300 grams. You see?
Yeah, I see.
300 grams. So what do you think about that? When we use pulley, it makes our work easier?
Yes.
Yeah. So pulley from the machines, from the simple machines. Do you remember some machines like pulley?
Yes.
Like what?
Wheel and axle.
Wheel and axle, right?
I forgot that's
Screw,
oh.
inclined plane, all of that makes our work easier.
3 pulleys working together. I took 1,000 gram weight, and now I'm only pulling 300 grams. I would say our work is really easier. I wonder what would happen if we put 4 pulleys or 5 pulleys or 6 pulleys or 7 pulleys all together and had them working together. It would be very complicated to show you. And actually, scientists have designed a pulley system where all these pulleys are put together really closely. It's called a block and tackle, and it's made to make lifting easier. It makes work easier. Simple machines, like pulleys, make work easier. Pulleys are simple machines, and pulleys really are all around us. Cars use pulleys, boats use pulleys, cranes use pulleys. Take a look around you and see if you can find pulleys, but sometimes you might just have to look up in order to find that pulley. If you want to learn more about pulleys and simple machines, take a look at some of our links in the video description. Science is so.
Okay, now we are going to see simple, more simple.
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Days. And we're going to start today with a history lesson in honor of the Great Pyramids.
Now we are going to see wheel and axle.
We're going to build our own little pyramid. We're not going to use big, huge blocks of stone. We're going to use little bricks. Now keep in mind, when they built the Great Pyramids out of these huge, big blocks of stones, they didn't use complicated machines like cranes and bulldozers and dump trucks. So what did they use? Well, we're going to take a closer look at what they used. They didn't have complicated machines to move these big blocks of stone, but they did have simple machines, and those simple machines made their work easier. And that's the big idea. We're going to take a closer look at the wheel and axle. So let's start with a question. How much does this brick weigh? To figure that out, we're going to use our spring scale. So take a look at this. I'm going to lift the brick off the table and take a look at our spring scale. It's reading a little over 1,000 grams, or right at 1,000 grams. Now those big blocks of stones in the real Great Pyramids weighed a lot more. There's no way they could lift those blocks up and carry them. So let's see what happens if we try and drag this brick. If they could drag those big blocks of stone, and see how many grams it takes to move this brick if I drag it. So now let's try dragging our brick. I get it started moving, and I can look. It's between 300 and 400 grams as I drag the brick. So it was easier to drag this brick than it was to lift it up and carry it. But the blocks that made up the Great Pyramid were so big and so heavy that they were even really difficult to drag. So the people back in history had a problem. How do we move these massive, huge, big blocks of stone? Well, through science, we've discovered that you usually solve problems by asking the right questions. What if? What if I cut these trees down and use these round logs to go under the block? I wonder if that's going to make our work easier. So we've placed our block on top of these round tree logs, and now we're going to pull it and see if our work is easier. Let's try it out. So I gently pull. Believe it or not, my spring scale barely moved off of 0 grams. It hardly took any energy to move this block on these round tree logs. But what do we do now? We're out of trees.
Yes, Osama, what do you say?
I say he put the rock in all of this. He was doing like a car, or like a car.
That's right. So this is called wheel and axle. When he tried to find the weight of the stone without this wheel and axle, it weighs about 1,000 grams or 500 grams. But with wheel and axle, it's about 0 grams. So look, wheel and axle makes our work easier.
Tree logs. So that means we would have to pick up this tree log and move it to the front, pick up this tree log and move it to the front, pick up this tree log and keep moving the tree logs to the front from the back. Well, that's a lot of work too. Well, good news, science is not finished yet. Well, what if I take this tree log and cut sections off of the tree log? Let's see what we're left with when we do that.
Yeah,
Yes, Osama?
his name is Alex.
Alex.
Then,
Right.
well, Alex.
It's axle.
So what do we have? Well, we have the wheel. But how do I attach this wheel to our block? Well, through science, we've discovered that we can attach 2 wheels with an axle. This piece of wood is going to be our axle, but I need some way to attach the axle to the wheel. And to do that, I'm going to use styrofoam. Now, cutting styrofoam is really not a kid-friendly thing to do. It's difficult, and you don't want kids using sharp knives or cutters. So we came up with a really kid-friendly way to allow kids to cut styrofoam. It may not be the prettiest, but it works. So all I'm going to do is trace my wheel on my styrofoam and use something thin like this screwdriver and just go around the wheel, punching down the styrofoam, taking my time, working my way around the wheel. It's pretty easy to push through the styrofoam. And once I get all the way around, now all I need to do is push, and it comes right out. Now we need to take our styrofoam plug, put it into our wheel, and now I'm ready to attach my axle. Just going to push my axle into the styrofoam on both sides.